My name is Shauna Chung, and I am a PhD student as well as an English teacher at Clemson University. And today I'd like to talk to you about a way to bring excitement to students in the classroom using digital tools. But before I get into the details of this, I would like to tell you a story. So this is 3-year-old me reading to my brother against his will. And this was not an uncommon sight to see around this age because it was around this time that I told my parents, who are the children of Korean immigrants, that I wanted to become a teacher. That was my dream job. And this was in part inspired by this belief that they'd instilled in me from a very young age, which is that education changes the world. And I completely believe this. And so with this in mind, I proceeded through my education. So in high school, I developed a love for English, which catalyzed me selling my soul to the humanities in college, which subsequently led to me pursuing a master's degree in English. And it was in my early graduate experience that I realized that there is power in the written word. And I learned this as a result of taking a lot of literacy theory classes. So I was completely prepared to write a master's thesis on literacy acquisition in Koreans immigrating to the United States. And then one semester, I took a course called Digital Rhetoric. And it was in this course that my teacher explained that in addition to the written word, there's also other modes at our disposal. We have images as well as sounds. And in order to harness the power of these alternate modes, we needed to become active participants in instead of passive observers of these media. So she had us creating video essays. I created a podcast episode, and I was completely sold. It unlocked this creative voice that I never even knew that I had. And so I asked her at the end of that semester, how do I do this forever? And more importantly, how do I give this tool to students? And so she pointed me in the direction of Clemson University's Rhetorics, Communication, and Information Design program. And my dream came true. In 2017, I was admitted into the program, and I took a course taught by Dr. Jan Homovic, who's pictured here on the right. This is proof of my cohort for surviving his class. It was a very intense, rigorous dive into digital literacy. And instead of telling you about this course, I'd like to show you a video that I produced towards the end of that semester that Jan ended up calling a trailer for his course. So here is that video.
Hello, my name is Shauna Chung, and I'm a first-year PhD student at Clemson University. I'm currently in the RCID program and taking a course taught by Jan Homovic called Rhetorics, Communication, and Information Technologies. Each week we read a book and create reading responses based on a creative heuristic. These heuristics are single words that Jan provides to inspire and/or guide our readings and processes of invention. Over the course of this semester, we've had 10 heuristics: red, wave, spectrum, focus, eclipse, insight, felt, Mario, overcome, and bricolage. Over the past 3 months, after countless sleepless nights, crazy excursions for the sake of collecting footage, and weekly collaborations with colleagues who've now become friends, I've produced an Adobe Spark page, post, and video, a Lightroom slideshow complete with narration and music, and 6 videos in Adobe Premiere Pro with a brief foray into the After Effects world. This, I'd argue, is a triumph, which just so happens to be this week's creative heuristic for Jesper Juul's The Art of Failure. But the path to these triumphs was paved by failure. Lots of failure. Failure you, dear viewer, did not see. Welcome to my journey. This is gonna be the one. One more time. No. Oops. Why is this so difficult? I can't do this anymore. Okay. Welcome to my journey. 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 Ah!
Jan hated vertical video. He told us never, never shoot vertical video. Thank you. So as you could see, Invention was really embedded into every single aspect of this class, and Jan really promoted this idea that we learn through making. And he facilitated this type of learning in two ways. So the first thing that we did is he helped us gain some technical skills. So a lot of people in my cohort, they'd never made a video before. We were all working with software that we'd never used before. And so each week he would teach us a couple of video editing tools or photo editing tools. We would take that skill home, we would hone it, we would practice it, we would seek out other tutorials online to refine that skill. And then we weren't just creating for the sake of creating, we were also applying theoretical frameworks. So as you saw, we read a book every single week, and we had to find a way to creatively respond to what we'd read. And so as a result of doing all of these things, we produced 13 videos in 16 weeks, in addition to a couple more multimodal projects, and it all culminated in a final video that was about 10 minutes, that was a documentary-like thing, and Jan asked us to address some sort of current issue happening in the world. And so the way that he wanted us to locate this issue was by connecting ourselves. He said, in order to address an issue in the world, you have to begin with yourself. You have to figure out, what is this problem that is in the world that keeps calling to you, that you can't look away from? And what this taught me is that my story matters. My story matters. And so I decided to explore the tension that was happening at that time between North Korea and the United States. And this led to one of the most meaningful academic experiences that I've ever had. And I'd like to show you just a very short trailer to this longer project right now. So here is that trailer.
I have family in North Korea, but I don't know their names, faces, or language. It took 26 years for me to be curious about their mere existence, not even their histories. What sparked this curiosity? Battles in cyberspace or nuclear threats? No. 2 syllables. Chung-un. One day I had a strange realization. My Korea name shares 2 syllables with the North Korean dictators. This random connection, silly and ridiculous as it seemed, disturbed me. Those 2 syllables felt incriminating, though I knew they meant nothing. Kim Jong-un and I don't even share a family name, but I couldn't shake the feeling, and thus began my investigation into a forgotten history and a present reality. I started with my family, specifically my maternal grandfather. I knew that in 1948, he and his immediate family escaped from the north on foot, fleeing to the southernmost point of Korea and immigrating to Los Angeles 15 years later. What was missing from this narrative were the relatives he left behind in North Korea, ones he tried to reconnect with when he traveled to Pyongyang in 2006. Detailed stories, along with footage of them from his trip, however, were missing. So I looked to media and entertainment discourses to fill in the gaps. How had they shaped my perception of North Korea and its people? While I recalled stories of mass starvation and oppression at the hands of a ruthless dictator, I also remembered Hollywood parodies and sketch comedy of the Hermit Kingdom. Horrors were always masked by laughs. My education did little to temper the disconnect. In high school, I learned that there was a war in the 50s. A line was drawn at the 38th parallel. The United States suffered numerous casualties, and monuments were created to honor the fallen. Then I forgot about it all until the 2 syllables. As a result of that aleatory tie to North Korea, more tightly knotted by my family's history, complicated by the discourses of entertainment and school, I soon recognized that I forgot not just a timeline of events, but also the people who bought me my freedom. I exist because the people of North Korea exist. These individuals rendered invisible except through testimony and propaganda. Though it may be impossible to fully know who they are and how they exist, we do know how we respond. We've repaid them with promises of fire and fury, with insults, and as a result are prone to forget their sacrifice. When we look at them, we should see a reflection of ourselves, oblivious to the outside, governed by forces who lead with threats instead of dialogue. We can no longer feign ignorance. We've been implicated in this problem, and we cannot look away. Even when we try, it will find us in our very reflections.
So this ended up being, like I said before, one of the most profound academic experiences of my life. I was able to shoot my own footage. I was able to reconnect with my grandparents, or really dive into some of the footage, the primary footage that my grandfather had collected while he was in North Korea to visit some of his relatives. And I was just able to engage with this material and this issue in a much deeper way than I would have ever anticipated. And I will never forget this experience creating this video and excavating this topic. And so as a result of taking this class, I came away with 3 main takeaways. The first one was that if you're going to cultivate technical skills, you need to do so in a fail-forward learning environment. Secondly, we need to use these skills in service to some sort of theoretical framework or some sort of larger issue that promotes invention. And thirdly, we need to create space for personal identities. So these were the 3 takeaways that I had as a student, and they were immediately objectives that I wanted to implement in my own classroom. So each semester, I teach 2 sections of first-year writing, and it's a class that almost every single freshman has to take. And I have a lot of STEM students. Clemson is a very STEM-heavy school. And I have a lot of engineering majors in particular who email me at the beginning of every semester in flawless, beautiful prose, and they say, I am not a writer, I hate English, I'm just going to try to get through this class and do my best. And so I thought, maybe if I can take this really impactful, profound experience that I'm having as a student, and I give that to my own students, maybe that will change their perception somewhat. So I started with developing technical skills in a fail-forward learning environment. And so one semester, I decided to open up my big research paper to a video essay. And one of my students came up to me after class. He's pursuing a degree in medicine, and he said, I'm really excited that you just opened this up to a video essay format. I watched so many YouTube videos, and I am really excited to do this project. So I was excited that he was excited, and he seemed like he knew what he was doing, and I said, go, create, this is so exciting. And so this was his first draft.
Dieting has become a common trend in America, but many dieters are unaware of the harmful effects that can result from these diets.
If you can't hear the audio, that's okay, because I couldn't hear the audio either.
Such as laxatives, diuretics, and other supplements. These diets are believed to detoxify the body.
So his thesis statement is coming up right here. Yes, so this is his thesis statement. He's talking about nutrition and health or something. I wasn't really sure. So basically, what I learned from this, I reflected in 2 ways. So the first reaction that I had was, this is really not any different from a traditional written essay. In essence, what this student has done is he read from a paper and he put a bunch of static images on screen. Secondly, I knew this is an extremely high-achieving student who does not cut corners. And he also seemed to have a lot of know-how about making videos and stuff. But then I gained a very critical insight. It's this. The digital native of this generation is often a consumer, not a creator of information. And when I realized this, I realized I needed to completely change the way that I taught and that I cultivated these technical skills. So the way that I intervened in this realization is through a couple of ways. First, we needed to remix traditional classroom practices. So it wasn't just out with the old and in with the new, but I had to explain how these traditional classroom practices don't go away, but we need to learn how to remix them. So a traditional outline became a storyboard, where I had my students map their multimodal decisions frame by frame in order to create a more cohesive narrative. Secondly, we needed to establish multiple checkpoints. It wasn't just product focused, but they needed to be able to refine their work over a period of time. So we had experimentation drafts. I had them do dry runs where they would present their multimodal work to their peers and get some feedback. And so from this, they learned what was working, what wasn't, and how to continue to push the envelope in ways that they knew were more effective. Third, I had them study mentor texts. So though they were consuming a lot of media, we needed to make sure that we knew what these media were doing and why certain things were effective. So we looked at previous student examples, we looked at YouTube videos, and we had to ask ourselves, how is this creator using sound in an effective way? How is that creator pairing their script with some images on screen in order to make their message come alive instead of just distracting audiences? And then finally, we had to formulate realistic expectations together. Even though we looked at all of these really amazing mentor texts, I also told them, you have 3 to 5 weeks to make this video. You don't have months. I'm not expecting Hollywood-level quality, videos. I'm also not expecting you to become a filmmaker. But what I want you to do is use your multimodal affordances in intentional ways and be able to explain why you chose that. And so, as a result of these types of interventions, that same student, this was his final draft.
Dieting has become a common trend in America, but many dieters are unaware of the harmful effects that can result from these diets. Some of these diets require people to avoid certain food groups or to take certain medications such as laxatives, diuretics, and other supplements. These diets are believed to detoxify the body to promote weight loss, but they are not supported by credible sources. Instead of following the latest diet craze, potential dieters should follow the recommendations stated in the 2015-2020 Dietary Guidelines for Americans to live longer, healthier lives by preventing many diseases from occurring.
So as you can see, the audio quality has gone up a significant amount, and that was as a result of us looking at these mentor texts. This student actually went and looked at YouTube tutorials on how to increase the volume quality or the audio quality. He sent me these videos in order to share with his classmates. It was incredible. I didn't have to ask him to do any of those things. Additionally, he said, I want to keep a static image for my thesis statement because I don't want to distract viewers. I want them to just focus on the argument that I'm trying to make here. So he was able to really articulate his choices in more intentional ways. So that was my first foray into cultivating technical skills in a fail-forward learning environment, but I also realized that these other two objectives needed attention, and this really became very relevant to me at the beginning of last year when I found out that all first-year writing teachers were required to have a theme to at least one of their assignments that deals with Clemson's history. So just a little bit of background information. Clemson is in the midst of grappling with its long and complicated history. Our campus is situated on pillaged Native American land that was later developed into a plantation with over 100 slaves. And so over time, these histories have kind of been hidden, or they haven't been known in their fullness. And due to the really brave work of faculty members and some administration on campus, these histories and these stories are coming to light in more of its fullness. And so they thought that this first-year writing course could be a good host class to start having these conversations because we get all of the freshman students. But as I was acquainting myself with these histories, and as I was reflecting on the ways that I could theme an assignment around these topics, I realized I'm going to have really difficult conversations with these students, and I can't just slap a theme onto one assignment. I needed to scaffold this theme throughout my entire course in order to prepare the way for that. So what I decided to do is take the same framework that I'd utilized in Jan's class, and I adapted it for my own class, and I created a sequence of 4 assignments. It began with a personal narrative because my story matters. Okay, so we started with a personal narrative where students would interrogate their own positionalities. They would ask themselves, how have these various forces in my life shaped the way that I view and operate in the world? This would lead to a video essay where students would perform a visual rhetorical analysis of a historical marker that they locate on campus. So I told them to find this historical marker or to connect yourself to this historical story. I would like you to use your identity to motivate you or to guide you to that issue. And I told them, even if it's kind of random. For example, if you take a calculus class in Bennett Hall, and there happens to be a historical marker outside of Bennett Hall, that could be the way that you locate that story. So after doing that video essay, they would write a traditional research paper that expanded the research that they'd done in their second essay. And then that would all culminate in a group project where students would get into groups of three or four and produce a 6 to 8 minute video that adapted the research that one or several of their teammates had produced. And so as you can see here, I took my students to special collections on campus. They were able to put their hands on primary documents, and it was just such a cool experience. And so over the course of this past year, my students have explored really important stories. We've talked about the history of slavery on campus, the convict laborers who built our buildings, the admission of Harvey Gantt, the first African-American student to attend the university, the history of Native Americans, also the integration of women in what was otherwise an all-white male military school, and then also the naming of certain buildings, the controversial naming of certain buildings on campus. So this semester, 2 of these stories really resonated with students, the integration stories of African Americans as well as women. And what I noticed is when I gave these digital tools to these students, when I opened this up to the video format, they started to engage in the content in a way that I could never have planned for. And I'd like to show you excerpts from 3 of these student projects, and we'll start with this one that deals with the history of women on campus. So I had a team of students, and they said, well, in order to kind of frame this problem, what we want to do is we want to poll students on campus. And so this is an excerpt from one of their videos.
I would say I have more male professors.
Wait, I don't know. Do I count? Probably more males.
It's about equal.
Male?
I'd say I have more female professors.
I have more female professors.
Male.
Male. Male. Male. Male. Male.
I'd say it's pretty even, honestly.
In my classes, I probably have more females.
It's about equal, maybe a little more male. Well, I'm engineering, so definitely male.
Mostly.
No. I do not.
Good.
No. I do not.
No. 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 Have you ever seen this? No. I haven't.
No.
I've never seen that, no.
No. No.
Yeah.
You have? Do you know?
I haven't read it, but I've seen it. I have.
Do you know what it's about?
No, I've never read it.
Okay.
As seen in the responses of Clemson students, there is a big difference in the ratio of male and female professors on campus. In addition, many students have no knowledge about the first woman to graduate from Clemson University, whose story is displayed on this marker that students pass every day on their way to class.
So what I saw in this example is on-campus engagement. Because they knew that they were producing a video, they wanted to get out and see what their peers thought about this situation. And so one of the project leaders in this group, she said, we saw one of the guys that we interviewed reading the marker after we talked to him. And so what they were able to see was that they were making a change in real time. By interacting with their peers in real time, they were able to share this story that they'd been researching all semester. And in addition, it's one thing to just read about this, and it's a completely other thing to be able to apply this in the real world. So I had another group engage in a similar way, but they broadened their sphere of engagement. And so they also addressed the history of women on campus, and so this is an excerpt from another one of my student groups.
Here's an interview from Mr. Griffin, a former graduate of Clemson University, who attended from 1955 to 1960 and witnessed firsthand the process of coeducation.
At the beginning of my tenure at Clemson, there was only one girl on campus at all, and that was Carolyn Willis, who was a majorette. That made big news. That was really something, one girl. But otherwise, I didn't encounter for the next 5 years any females in any class that I had. My daughter and my granddaughter have both finished. Grandson has finished. I've got another grandson finishing this time. But anyway, there's two girls in my life that have gotten a super good education and a heck of an experience at Clemson University.
So again, it was one thing for students to read about this, and it was a completely other thing for them to hear it articulated from a primary source, from somebody who actually lived that experience. And they were able to find that story and display that story and bring that story to their classmates through the lens of a camera. And so what I saw was local community engagement, because this individual was one of my students' neighbors. And so she didn't know him very well, but she heard through the grapevine that he had gone to Clemson around the same time that they were doing their research, or in the same period of this research. And so she decided to seek out his voice. It was really, really incredible. So some of my students, they took engagement even a step further. And so this final example that I'd like to show you, my students, they explored the history of Harvey Gantt's admission to Clemson University, and I'd like to show you that right now.
The integration of Clemson University came with no violence, riots, or disturbances. Rather, there was only silence. Why was this the case at a school located right in the middle of such extreme racism? Was it Clemson's authorities that were responsible for the peace that day, or was it the so-called Clemson Man Standard that the school newspaper at the time referenced? However, the real reason for the peace that occurred on January 28, 1963, happened a year before, at the campus of Ole Miss University. On September 30th, 1962, James Meredith, the first African-American student to attend Ole Miss, arrived to his dorm room on campus. His arrival brought immediate disturbance as thousands of students flooded the campus to voice their opinion on his acceptance. The crowd soon grew much bigger and was joined by nearby supporters of the school. As time went on, the rioters soon became violent and began assaulting people and damaging property on campus. President Kennedy was pressed to send reinforcements to put an end to the violence. At the end of the riots, 2 men had lost their lives and dozens others were injured. With the horrifying riots on the minds of the American people, Harvey Gantt's expected arrival at Clemson College was looming. Many in the South expected the admission of Harvey Gantt to bring the worst riots yet due to the deep Southern pride of South Carolina. But to the surprise of many, the opposite was true. Harvey Gantt arrived to Clemson early in the morning to silence and peace. The success that Clemson had with the integration of Harvey Gantt would not have been possible without the violence that occurred at Ole Miss. In response to the riots, Clemson President Robert E. Edwards declared that Clemson would not respond the same way as Ole Miss did, and he even sent his relations direct down to Mississippi to learn from their mistakes.
Covering from a second night of violent clashes between protesters.
This is one of our darkest days as a city, and I know that we're much better than this.
The officers are dealing with some cars that have been lit on fire in the intersection. Bottles are being thrown at them.
One person is said to be on life support after he was shot. People do remain in a collective state of demonstrative anger.
Another night of unrest in Charlotte. What started out as a peaceful march in the city's uptown area quickly turned violent. Now, there were also reports of looting, and 2 employees at the nearby Hyatt House Hotel were assaulted by protesters. One person was shot and is in critical condition.
So what I saw in this example was engagement on a broader scale. And 2 of my students are actually from Charlotte, and so they were able to see these connections between the history that they were talking about and then also current day events. And what was really, really interesting about this was that I didn't have to ask them to do any of this. I didn't ask them to find historical footage, but they sought that out on their own in order to make this video. And as a result of all of this, the student who narrated this, he gave me feedback on my projects, and at the end of the semester he said, I really enjoyed the group video project because at the end of the project, I looked at what we had created and actually felt like it meant something, and it wasn't just something else I had done to try and get a good grade. And this is what I'm finding with all of these examples. Excitement is conductive. And a lot of times, these digital tools, they catalyze this kind of excitement and this kind of engagement. And when you activate one, you activate multitudes. Because of the inspiration that I received from my teacher, I was able to give this to some of my students, and they continue to have conversations with their peers about these histories. In addition, I am one of many. So many of my colleagues could have given this exact same presentation and done a much better job. But what unites all of us is that we were inspired, and all it took was that one initial spark. Thank you very much.